Welcome, everyone. For those that tune into my channel and listen to the signs, planets, and stellar rhythms episodes, I have various special episodes and I have regular episodes. This is a regular episode with a little bit of a special content, in part of what's happened, recent events in the past. This month in January 2021, there's a lot that has taken place and more to come. The time of this recording is January 17th, 2021. And right now we're in the middle of a exact Uranus Jupiter square. But that's part of, again, this isn't like the day, oh my gosh, this is the day where everything takes place. Well, it is an important day, but there's a lot more that is being uncovered and revealed for all of us. And I want to take some moments here to share about the astrological alignments in this video, what happened at the US Capitol January 6th, and what's coming up on the inauguration with the new president, Joe Biden, and then the rest of January. There's some important things that are happening in the second half of January that are definitely worth sharing about, including a Mercury retrograde and then also a Neptune alignment with the lunar nodes. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and start this process. Okay, so welcome to episode 14. This is the first official episode of 2021. I did a complete review of 2021, or the major highlights anyway, in a previous video a couple of weeks ago, just before January 1st. So this is Signs, Planets, and Stellar Rhythms, and the 14th regular episode. So today, we're going to be discussing really the primary focus is the second half of January, and with a little bit of what's taken place earlier this month. So the astrological alignments of the inauguration, the insurrection, and the Mercury retrograde, and much more are coming up, and that I'm going to be highlighting. Mercury retrograde, if you're wanting to watch that, that's towards the end of this episode because it happens at the end of January. So, trying to sort this out, there is just so much taking place. Again, this is starting off to be a very different theme in 2021 as it was in 2020, but there is still a lot that's carried over that we're sorting out as a society, not just here in the United States, but in the world. So there isn't like everything is going to be, just grand as soon as we turn the calendar from December 31st to January 1st. There's always a lot of like continuity that takes place astrologically, and the things that were seeded the prior year and so forth, especially with such a powerful set of alignments that were in place in 2020. Okay, so let's just take a moment to have an acknowledgement and honor the stars, Mother Earth, Gaia, all the elements, the ancestors, those that came before us, those that are here now, and those that will come later. And all of the planets from Mercury, the Sun, as well as the Moon, which are not planets, but they're included in the ancient description of planets: Mars, Uranus, Eris, Neptune, Chiron, all the asteroids, the big asteroids, and Venus and Mercury. So all of these play really big roles in our lives, and we want to acknowledge and honor them, welcome them to our sharing in this video. And we are all part of the co-creation of the cosmos. We are all part of each other's lives down to the quantum level. So we want to share with that and connect with that for ourselves and take a few moments to breathe. And that I do see in the long term, again, as I've shared in other videos, that there is signs of hope coming forward in the future, especially as we get later into the middle part of 2021. So let's move forward, and thank you, and be grateful for these moments and the breath of life, the breath of creation itself. Okay, so here are the highlights that I'm going to talk about. More about Saturn and Jupiter in the sign of Aquarius. It kind of bleeds into pretty much everything that is going to be 2021 related. The Mars-Uranus conjunction, which happens on Inauguration Day, Mars-Jupiter square, which is something that happened not long ago. Or actually, hang on, the Mars-Saturn square happened not long ago, but the Mars-Jupiter square is coming up. Then we have Uranus-Jupiter square, which is at the time of this recording, this is the day of that. Neptune Lunar Nodes square, and then we have Mercury Retrograde. So all of this happening in January. So it's really a highly active major alignments, planetary alignments taking place during this month. Just as a reminder, one of the major events that astrologically speaking took place on December 21st at the half degree mark in the sign of Aquarius between Saturn and Jupiter, and their first conjunction in that sign in many centuries. So this is, again, really, really important as it is releasing that energy into that sign of Aquarius throughout 2021 and beyond, as Saturn really spends the next 2.5+ years in this sign, in that degree. Jupiter, on the other hand, spends most of its time in the sign of Aquarius this year, with a couple of months in the sign of Pisces, which will be, another episode in the, say, the mid-spring time when we can talk more about that. Okay, so one of the things that that happened on January 6th, just a few hours after the time of the storming of the U.S. Capitol, was Mars moving into the sign of Taurus. And that anytime a planet ingresses into a new sign, it is important. And for Mars, it's even more so because it spent the last 6.5 months in the sign of Aries, when it was when Earth had caught up to it in its orbit and went retrograde and came back. And then finally on January 6th, it moved in the sign of Taurus. Now, this by itself is not necessarily the quote cause, if you want to look for a cause, and astrologically as the thing that created the circumstances for the insurrection. That is something that is multi-layered and was really planted much more so long before 2020. But it took on a completely elevated motion in 2020 to really, to a large degree. It wasn't just that, the seeds were there for a while, but they blossomed in 2020 and then fully expressed themselves just 6 days after the turn of the year. But Mars in the sign of Taurus is essentially the masculine version of the lover, the intent to bring spirit fully into matter, and the physical and sensual, and establish the deepest intimacy, basis of friendship and trust. This comes from the definition of Shamanic Astrology in the Shamanic Astrology Handbook from Daniel Giamario. It's about the fullness of Earth's bounty, the aesthetics of life on a personal level, and taking the time to experience the quality and subtleness of touch, scent, sight, sound, and taste. So engaging in the 5 senses, the physical senses, and using the body fully in the realm of pleasure, as in the school of Epicure. Now, this has, you look at this and go, well, what does this have to do with what happened on January 6th in Washington, D.C.? But what this is it's bringing on a new tone in this particular sign. However, the alignments, Mars is getting closer and closer to the sun, to the planet of Uranus, and actually began to get it was within 6 degrees of Uranus. It was squaring Saturn and Jupiter on that day. And so, not exact squares, but it was the whole month of January is about, in part, that relationship between these planets. And so those forces in particular, those aspects, those relationships really took precedence here. And I'll give you an example when we get into that space. But of course, Mars is in Taurus for a couple of months until March 3rd. So as we go through this, especially the Mars-Uranus relationship is going to be big. And then Mars even leaving the sort of the bandwidth of Uranus by the second half of February. So we could be seeing some additional insights around the Mars process as it distances itself from Uranus in February. And of course, there will be regular videos, and I will be giving everyone updates about this. But this is the essence is still, the essence of Mars and Taurus is still here. It's still able to tap into. We still can experience this if we choose to. And it ends up giving kind of a sense of, I look at this also as a sense of hope, and as far as the masculine, the slowing down of the process, the taking the time to go be thorough. And it's about the not so rushing into decision making. However, there are a lot of other things at work here, and so Mars is, I don't want to say it's overwhelmed, but it's certainly, as far as the Taurus archetype, it's not fully being expressed at this time. At least that's from the aftermath of 2020 and the intensity of this one with the pandemic and the political uh, division that has happened. So I'll go ahead and go forward here. So the insurrection at the U.S. Capitol. This was on that day, January 6th. On that date, the Congress. It's a ceremonial counting. It's not that they can actually quote overturn an election. That's the based on the Constitution. That's the electors that have that capacity. It's up to the Congress to count that and to formalize that counting. So, but still, it was a threat to President Trump and in his own mind, and that's an entirely new topic. I could probably later on do a full analysis of him in his chart. I've written about him a few times, and the more that I learned about him, the more concerned and I am about his who he is and what he stands for. And I've never been a supporter of him, but I'll just share that my friends, people that I've talked to, are all were stunned about what took place and the lives that were lost, and the emerging other people that were involved within the that are were complicit in this, even a real conspiracy, and that will be investigated to see to what extent it was going on. But again, I felt like it was a desecration of sacred ground for as an American in the United States, of basically vandalizing and the attempted, there was some conversations and dialogue that there was attempted not just takeover, but even kidnapping and potential harm to Congress people at the Capitol, and especially, of course, the police, many of which were injured, and one actually died from their injuries. So I definitely feel that the rallies created the circumstances for this to be birthed, and on that day, it definitely resulted in that from Trump. So, what were the major players in the U.S. or the astrological world? Well, there was a Saturn-Jupiter conjunction window that we're in now that squares. We're still in that Saturn-Jupiter window. And it's in part that window is going to kind of go much. It won't be very much in the latter part of 2021. There may get, in the retrograde spec, with Saturn going retrograde, Jupiter going retrograde, they may get into a closer alignment again, but nothing anywhere close to what they are right now in January. So there's going to be great separation from those two planets. But in this window, they also square Mars and Uranus. And in particular, Saturn has three squares of, almost like three square meals, three squares of Saturn and Uranus. We're also in the window this year of Pluto and Eris. And I think this also contributed to the intensity and the underworld death rebirth experience we are all part of. And in my last video about 2021, I talked about the Pluto return of the United States. This is part of that deal here, with Eros playing a very significant role in that. Okay, so here's the chart, and I'm using 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's according to the research I've looked at, as far as that's the estimated time when the protesters, the insurrectionists, began to push forward into the capital area of the steps of the Capitol and all that, breaking through the barriers. So this is what it looked like in Washington, D.C. We can see these. Here's and I want to show you here. This is interesting because Mars didn't move into Taurus until 2:27 Pacific time, so 5:27 Eastern time. So it was another 4.5 hours before Mars moved into the sign of Taurus. But this is one of the things that things don't have to be, quote, exact. And this is one of the things about astrologically. It's like it's much more analog rather than digital. It's the connection, the relationship in the sky. And so we're seeing Mars getting closer and closer and closer, and we saw a buildup, and then boom. Mars being in Aries was, I think, more explanatory of what took place than Mars in Taurus. Aries is much more fiery, spirited, action-oriented, mission-oriented, and having that even squaring part of Pluto and Uranus, and then Saturn and Jupiter, all of these squaring and conjuncting each other. I mean, this was really a powerful set here. And this is a theme of this month. This is a theme of really all of January, essentially, with these planets. So something to consider that isn't just this one day or the next day. It's all of this. Now, Mars and Uranus don't get together as an exact conjunction until January 20th, just about 2 hours after the official swearing in of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Speaking of Kamala Harris, I've had to look up and make sure that I'm pronouncing that right, because apparently I was looking at very different definitions, and even news people were sharing various ways of pronouncing her name. And so I'm getting familiar with that. So if I've pronounced it incorrectly in the past, I just want to share with everyone that it wasn't intentional. It was simply I was not paying attention myself to the spelling, or not the spelling, but the pronunciation. I thought I had been pronouncing it right, but it's Kamala Harris. That's from what I understand to be the correct one. But even Kamala herself sometimes even pronounces her name, quote, incorrectly, according to some sources. But again, I'll leave that up to others. I'll just do my best to present it in the best way that I can. But what we're seeing here astrologically is this. Here's Uranus Jupiter squares within 3 degrees, Uranus Saturn square within 5, Mars Saturn square within 3, and we can even say Mars and Pluto's within 6 degrees. And then we have Mars Jupiter within 4.5 degrees. So really, they're all hanging around this 3 to 5 degree mark. And that's really juicy territory for when it comes to alignments. The closer they are, the greater impact, the greater influence, and the greater opportunities we have to experience what we're experiencing in our lives. So you can see here, Saturn and Jupiter are within 2 degrees of each other at that time. So even though they were conjunct on the 21st of December, it takes them a while. It takes a while for Jupiter to separate from Saturn. So we are still in that window of great change here. And this was one of the interesting things about this insurrection, is that it fully revealed all the things that we need to look at. I mean, truly, like almost everything, and it encapsulated in just a few hours of time. As the later on, the Capitol Police and the National Guard came in and were able to clean out the Capitol in that particular early evening, early to mid evening time. So um, this is really important. It gives us a real powerful opportunity, not just the political party system and the constitutional crisis we're having, but to find out the value of peace and dialogue and diplomacy and actual conversations, actual like, hey, seeing across like this is let's look deeply, let's look at the laws and this that we can't just skirt them, that they're in place for a reason here, and especially if we have a leader that comes into power that is absolutely almost completely out of control. Although he was, some of his things were checked in or checked and balanced a bit by Congress in his term, it really wasn't all that much. And this just shows, for example, the lack of planning and the potential conspiracy that is taking place at that insurrection. So, but the Aquarius is an energy that is about kind of a rebellious nature. It has this sense of like wanting to break down the old traditions, the old standard, and to transform, especially with ideas. And Aries is through action. And so that Aquarius Aries combination can create the circumstances for action to fully take place in that environment. Now with Mars moving into Taurus, this could again, it definitely has a little bit of influence of changing the speed of things. So I do see that there's going to still be more after effects, more challenge to the system in various places. There is a deeply rooted that has been here since the beginning of this country and well before that had about this white privilege, white nationality, the manifest destiny doctrine in the 1800s, the militant groups and things that have been around long before Trump became, a well-known figure. These folks have had in various incarnations have been around, and so now we're seeing them come to a head. And yeah, I've heard people talk about that this could be a war, but I think it's something along the lines that we've connected with in the past, like a quote drug war or a war on terror. It's going to be fought more underneath, but with flashes here and there. And it's going to give us a sense of awareness and greater clarity in our own backyard to go, hey, we really need to give this attention, that this is something we can't let go on. And at the very same time, to truly find and grieve and heal what the wounds that this country has borne for centuries, and that we've never truly fully healed. And this is giving us an opportunity. There's other factors at work, like Chiron in Aries, for example, that I feel like is playing a really major role just by being in this space for us to bring into a place where we can heal and grieve what we have been as a nation, and maybe find another path, find another way in this death and rebirth experience that we're all having. And the pandemic has been one that has also been as deadly and as powerful as that has been. It's also showed us how we can step up and mourn and appreciate and the sacredness of being human and being able to connect with each other, and how powerful that has been. And some of us, and many of us, have taken that for granted. And now we're in a place where we can fully appreciate that, especially when we get to a place where things open up more and we're seeing more people and we're connecting in larger groups in the months ahead. So we'll see as we go forward here. But this is again really powerful, and I normally don't look at the political things very much, but because of the intensity of what has taken place and the shock, the Uranus unexpectedness, but also, kind of unexpected what Trump is capable of. And so, but the shock of it, the feeling of it, and how it hits home in our hearts and spirits, it really is just it can't be ignored, and that's why I'm putting this is in kind of one of the primary themes of this video here. Here are the actual Saturn square Mars, January 13th that happened recently, and then the Jupiter square Mars, January 22nd. That is almost 8 degrees Aquarius and Taurus there. So these are things to just as a reference to keep looking at, to realize that how powerful an influence that Mars had in 2020, and that carries over into the early months of 2021. So something to consider is the fact that one could do an entire set of videos just on Mars alone, and it's what it can activate, because in a transit situation, not as a personal Mars cycle or Mars return cycle that I've talked about at times with the Shamanic Astrology school, but it activates, it acts as a trigger, as a pressure point, as just like a quick hit kind of a thing, and pushes buttons and kind of allows the floodgates to be opened, if you will. And I believe it played a role in the January 6th event that took place. All right, so we have here in January, we have these Saturn, January and February, Saturn-Uranus square. The first of 3 will happen in February, 1 month from now, February 17th. And then Jupiter-Uranus square happens 1 month prior, which at the time of this recording is happening right now. So this 2021 thing is something I talked about, 2020, 2021, something I talked about in the prior video and even in other videos, especially the one that I recorded in 2017 called No Easy Way Through, is that the time period in which we're living, the closest one that I looked back, the closest one that mirrored it astrologically, not that same events are taking place, but that involves Saturn, Jupiter, and Pluto, and then also Uranus, is the 1285 to 1286 time period. That was the time of the ending places of the Crusades. The Mongol invasion of Europe was nearing a new high, and into Eastern Europe, there was a lot of collapse in various parts of where those events were happening. A lot of people's lives were lost, and it was beginning into the boundary stage. Like there was a period where it started getting into from the Middle Ages into a new set of knowledge, a century later, 2 centuries later, as we got into the Renaissance period. But there was something opening up, like the old patterns that had been lasting for centuries were starting to decay, and those alignments were helping move that energy. And maybe an entirely what I call evergreen video could be done just on the alignments from that time period, and that we could look at the how Saturn, Uranus, Pluto, and Jupiter, and then when they get together like they do, what that kind of creates in the world. But so in 2022, we also have almost a 4th exact square between Saturn and Uranus in the fall, a late summer, early fall, and that's fascinating, because that this theme of 2021 in part carries into 2022. So as we look forward, we're going into that space as well. Okay, so some of what this can apply to the Jupiter-Uranus square, except that Jupiter-Uranus square is much more expansive rather than contractive. So instead of growth through limits and boundaries, it's more like expansive vision quest territory or events meeting the unpredictable, unexpected events of great novelty. But again, this is Saturn and Uranus are still in this window. They're I mean, the whole most just about the whole year, and so it applies also in January as well. So it's something I'm going to talk much more about as we get into February when we have that first of three exact squares. But I will share that that Promethean rebelliousness, new knowledge, but also a side of this that isn't just political, but technological and spiritual breakthroughs in those areas, growth and in our own spiritual evolution, expansion of consciousness, as well as the connection to Mother Earth and her gifts to us, and our gifts to her. This is something that's going to be elevated much more so this year. And I think Jupiter is also playing a significant role in helping reveal that for us. Here are the prior times. This is something I talked about in the 2021 video, and I'll share much more in the videos to come. All right, so the inauguration. Here we have the exact Mars-Uranus conjunction. I still end up doing a video with Kaylin Castell that is just about inaugurations. I don't want to dwell too much on this one, but it's really important that we talk about this because it's coming up here on the 20th. This also features a Mars-Uranus conjunction and a Saturn-Jupiter conjunction squaring each other. So there has been no other inauguration that I've found that has had this same alignment. There's also a Neptune-Ceres conjunction. Ceres representing the Great Mother, and Neptune representing sort of the celestial ocean of divine formlessness and non-linearness. So that there's this great wild combination of forces at work here, and a lot of energy. We can see even on this this little astrology glyph here, map chart. We see Sun just moving into Aquarius that day. Actually the day, I think it happens officially the day before, and it's almost 1 degree Aquarius by then. Then we have Saturn, Jupiter, only 3.5 degrees apart. We have Mercury, 11.5 degrees from Jupiter, and the midheaven in Aquarius in Washington, D.C. So I find this really fascinating that this is happening at that time, and it's allowing us to maybe come together and have a wider conscious approach to this, and that's more for the people, but also at the same time opening up frontiers we've never opened up before in our lives. But also here, lastly, is to be prepared this time, not just that day, but this entire week and really the year of 2021 is even more, I would say, and to some degree unpredictable because of the Saturn-Jupiter alignment that is taking place in the Jupiter-Uranus, sorry, not just Saturn-Jupiter, but a Saturn-Uranus alignment and Jupiter-Uranus square. So let's take a moment into that. It's intended to create unexpected events of great novelty, things we've never experienced before that help create breakthroughs, or at least move us faster down our evolutionary, or shall I say, humanity's evolutionary path, whatever that is intended to become. Not to be attached to that, but something has yet to really fully unfold here. And this is fertile ground that we're in now. So there's a spark of something new and magnetic that wants to come through during this time. It's interesting about that on that day is that the moon ingresses into the sign of Taurus at about 2 o'clock Eastern time. So we're having Moon, Mars, and Uranus all in Taurus on Inauguration Day, and then the day after as well. So what this is, the moon can also act as an activator and bring about more of, the great, adding to the relationship of Uranus and Mars and Taurus, meaning this unpredictable, uh, how unpredictable influence, but also one that where action is intended to happen, where there's a almost like it's almost like a contradiction in terms, is that Uranus and Mars operate on a, I want to say, a quicker level, if you will. And then the sign of Taurus operates on a much slower level. In fact, of all the signs in the zodiac, I would say that one is kind of just is thorough. It operates on a much slower pace. And so you get this wild combination, and then it squares Uranus, squares Jupiter and Saturn. Well, anything is really possible. And so maybe that the unpredictable, the unexpected event is that it goes off very cleanly, that there is no problems. That happened in the during the U.S. election, general election in November. So taking a look at that and saying, "Oh my gosh, well, could that actually happen?" Yeah, it's possible. But I do think something will take place, but I don't know. I don't want to assign that anything that of what specifically could take place there, because this is where Uranus we're talking about here. Um, Here's the full chart of the inauguration, just to kind of give you this, understanding here. You can see the moon only 1 degree away from Taurus at that time, but 2 hours later, it moves right into having left Eris earlier. So that's part of it's carrying in some of that energy into Taurus here. And of course, there's a Taurus rising for Washington, D.C. at that time. So here we are in this Uranus Saturn themed with Mars and Jupiter, Taurus, Aquarius, all showing up very strongly here. And between the mind and the body, between consciousness and form, physicality and the celestial. And this is that territory where alchemy can be created. So each one of us can tap into that space ourselves. And for those of you who are having a personal cycle, you're going to definitely have some strong Aquarius or Taurus energy in the early degrees of these signs. And even in Scorpio and Leo, you definitely will be on some level activated, especially if you have personal points in those areas. Okay, so there were inaugurations that had Saturn, Jupiter, and Uranus. The 2001 inauguration, and of course this one here in 2021 with Taurus and Aquarius. So here we have in 2001, Saturn and Taurus squared Uranus and Aquarius. So it was the exact opposite. They were in opposite signs. We know that 2001, and we know that the 2000 election was very divisive as well. And so this is a coming back into that area. So 20 years later, Saturn and Jupiter conjunct every 20 years. So and they have that kind of an alignment, and this gives us a chance to look back at that and can reconnect. Here are previous inaugurations. The ones that I found that have a deep connection to this one as well is the 1933 and 1963 inaugurations, Franklin D. Roosevelt and Lyndon B. Johnson. Also, there's some on a deeper level, we could explore that in another video, but there's definitely some sort of like themes that looking back in history that show up also. The unexpected and the economic states of and the tension in the world. So just to give you a heads up on that. This is February. So I'll kind of skip this one because that's for another video, something I highlighted in my last video. All right, so we have Neptune lunar node aspects in 2021 with Vesta as well. And then here, this is the one that I wanted to talk about, is this Neptune squaring the lunar nodes. January 26th at 19 Pisces, Gemini, Sagittarius. Neptune's in Pisces and the lunar nodes are in Gemini and Sagittarius. So this lunar nodes stay within about 10 degrees of squaring Neptune from that started on May 1st of 2020, and that goes on until April 11th of 2021. This happens, the lunar nodes have every 50 months, 49 to 51 months on average, that they have a dynamic or hard aspect, conjunction, squares, or oppositions to the lunar nodes. And so the last time that these nodes were in conjunction with Neptune, the North Node was in 2008 in Aquarius, and then the South Node in Pisces in 2016. And there was also one in 2000 in Aquarius, the South Node in Aquarius. So this is when Neptune spent 13 or so years in that sign of Aquarius. Kaylin Castell and I did a whole video about the lunar nodes and the transition, and you can find that on shamanicastrology.com, and just about the lunar nodes in Gemini and Sagittarius. And it's a really good video if you really want to get a deep insight into what what the lunar nodes represent, because the South Node is connected to the past origin story, and then the North Node is connected to one's future. Some might say destiny. It's that future storyline that we're moving toward, as far as the actual soul's evolution for each of us, but also for humanity as well. When you look at world transits. And just to refresh, the lunar nodes are intersection points between the path of the sun, or plane of the solar system, and the moon's orbit of the Earth. And that the moon doesn't have a perfectly circular orbit. It goes up and down over that path, and that's what creates the solar and lunar eclipses, new moons and full moons. Okay, so what does this mean? Well, Neptune represents initiator of unreality, non-linear dissolving processes that operate in the celestial world. So the last time that there was any dynamic aspect between the lunar nodes and Neptune, while Neptune was in the sign of Pisces, and the lunar nodes were in Gemini and Sagittarius, it was in 1853, and they had they squared 3 times, like they do in this pattern of 2020 and 2021. Or sorry, not 3 times, just once in this pattern. 3 times with Vesta in the nodes. So that is a connection back to that time period. That was the certain age and what America was going through, and there was actually this whole thing around the relationship between the United States and Japan, and a revolution that took place in China. I think there were other forces at work there, but that was some of what was taking place then. The combination of all these signs and nodes and Neptune represent a veil upon human collective's direction in relation to the story we've carried for the last 19 years. Ways we communicate, connect, play, entertain, travel, believe, journey, and seek meaning through the hardened reality and tend to dissolve, so that we can open up to the great cosmic ocean and unhinge our attached identity. So, okay, so I've talked a lot about all those other planets and what they represent, and their alignments with each other, and how intense it could be. But I look at this and I see almost a salve. It's like a balancing act, that there's this great unknown, but also inner truths and meanings that are going to be revealed through this process, that that go beyond the 3rd dimensional reality, that allow us to kind of open up into new territory that isn't so hardened as it was, say, in 2020 with the Saturn, Jupiter, Pluto alignment in Capricorn. Now that Saturn and Jupiter are in Aquarius, this really can help us, I believe, spiritually speaking, moving into entire new territory, and not be as gravitationally intense. You mean that it doesn't have as much, quote, gravitas. I mean, it doesn't have like this this weight, that there's going to be this greater sense of hope and experience around this theme. So the lunar nodes and Neptune play a big role this year around what we are experiencing as our reality currently. And there are some people that are experiencing personal transits with the nodes, and the eclipse seasons in the spring and also in the fall, that also going to be sharing some assisting in that perception for all of us. Okay, these are the Mercury retrogrades in 2021, and the more highlighted one is January 30th through February 20th in Aquarius. This is of all the things that may end up help emphasizing Aquarius in a way, kind of adding to that, helping that, and emphasizing, is this Mercury retrograde, spending its whole time in Aquarius. So a lot of times it tends to dance between two signs, like it'll go into one sign, retrogrades back into another sign. Well, in this case, it's all just in Aquarius. So Mercury spends over 2 months in Aquarius, from January 8th through March 15th. And it's got an Aquarius theme. So during this time, Mercury is going to have 3 conjunctions with Jupiter, one with Saturn, and a square with Uranus. So Mercury is playing a supporting role here in it's making a contribution. So it's a time of creative wisdom, cosmic wisdom, meaning that there's knowledge that is uncovered from unconventional sources or unconventional methods from conventional sources. So it's a really more radical, revolutionary approach to connecting to the mind, to wisdom and knowledge itself. A time to tap into expanding one's own consciousness. And maybe it's a way to try new ways or paths or patterns to communicate with others. Novelty is a key here. So if you're used to communicating or connecting with something that may not, especially if it's not working very well, well, maybe this Mercury retrograde period can give us a chance to communicate in other ways. I definitely see this as a technological fertile ground, but I also see this from a spiritual perspective, that this could be, opening up the pathways and the mind, maybe, from an evolutionary standpoint. Not to say that we're all going to be these powerful psychic beings or anything like that, but it's opening up our sensitivities to the other realm, from the perspective of the mind and the perspective of the sort of the cerebral processes. It's a time also of experimentation, innovation. It's again a fertile ground for experimenting new ways, new techniques, spiritually, to connect with source, or finding contentment and having thought experiments. But also technologically speaking, this could be where we have even greater innovations. I do see that with the vaccine coming on into the general public as the months roll on, I see this as, in fact, the technology around this. These are very new kinds of vaccines that use mRNA, and very, very different from what we've had before. And we don't really know we kind of understand how effective they are, but we don't really know, like, as far as the long term. So that is something that will be worth exploring. And it's not just the medical science, but it's also our connection. This is the thing, our connection to the natural world. It's like, think of it as, especially because of the Uranus and Mars and Taurus, is the connection to the innovation of the earth sciences, the connection to to the environment, the health of the earth, and how that relates to our diet, relates to our physical health and our spiritual health, our balance in there. So this could be even a revolution in the way maybe our foods or how we take care of ourselves, our health. We can see that this COVID-19 has created a situation where we've gotten unhealthier as a country in a lot of ways over the last few decades, and now we're realizing some of the vulnerabilities. So when we're unhealthier, then in fact there's a large portion of the population that's living longer, so we're getting older in some ways, here in the United States at least, that they become more vulnerable to this to a pandemic, for example. So yeah, we've got some work to do health wise, and to realize like, hey, wait a minute, this are the way we do life, the way maybe we do food, the way we have our health system, and our hospital systems and our medical processes, that this is maybe a fertile fertile bed for more revolutionary ideas and new ways to connect. And so that Mercury retrograde could give us maybe some breakthroughs in that space, especially with Uranus's influence here. So this has been the 14th episode, and I'm somebody that does full on astrologer here, with that does personal readings and uh, astrocartography and synastry readings and so forth. And there'll be in the future, I'm planning to do more, I'm thinking of starting up kind of a monthly uh, you know meetup, with kind of just a small group each month. And so if someone's watching this and are interested in that, feel free to email me to have that. This would be something that would do over Zoom, and I think I might do just as just kind of a test bed, just having not necessarily open to everyone at the moment, but have kind of a limit, the first come first serve of who wants to be on these, and then maybe open up to further exploration. But this is an experimentation I want to do, and to have more dialogue astrologically and explore a lot of this stuff, because there's so much to explore out there astrologically and how it connects to all of our lives. And so that excites me, and going forward out there. So just thank you everyone for tuning into this longer video here. I was looking for it to be shorter, but it ended up becoming much longer than because there was so much to discuss here. So thank you all, and I wish you peace and wellness, and love. So be well, and stay safe out there. Take care. Bye.